بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب زدني علما.
Now let's try to understand the Cisco's next generation firewall. We call this as a firepower or firepower services, what it offers. So Cisco combines the ASA. Now Cisco have an ASA as well. Combines the ASA. Now you can have your normal standard firewall features inside the ASA, and you can combine your ASA with the firepower services, which are the next generation features, which supports next generation IPS, advanced malware protection, application visibility control, or URL filtering, application filtering, or application control. These all features can be combined. So either you can combine by using an ASA as well as a firepower services. And if you combine these two in today's network, we call this as a FTD, the firepower threat defense. So that's what the product name we call it as. So initially this Cisco's firewall or FTD or firepower, initially it was called as firepower. Now, when we say firepower means it's going to provide you most of your next generation firewall features. Like I said, next generation features means application visibility, all the URL filtering options. So if I'm using only firepower, now basically the firepower provides these features, and you can combine this with the existing ASA. Means either I can add a module, like you have an ASA and inside that you have a module, and inside the module you can either add in the form of an hardware module or install some software in the form of a software, and you can make your ASA to do both the jobs. So the traffic comes to the ASA and it will be redirected for next generation IPS or for firepower services and then send it back, and that's how it works. But Cisco have its own dedicated product as well. Now Cisco have, like I said, there are two options. One option is you can combine your ASA with firepower services, or you can buy a dedicated product called FTD, the firepower threat defense, which has a unified code. Means whatever the code or the operating system which runs inside this FTD basically supports both the ASA features as well as the firepower features. So you may see these two things, like if your company is already using an ASA and you want some additional firepower services, you can add a module in the form of module, or you can add a separate firepower device as well. Like if you see the options here, because this is a little bit confusing, because mostly people say firepower and then they add that firepower services on the ASA, and some people call it as FTD. So basically you can, in your network, you can either have these options here. You can have a dedicated ASA, a physical hardware, and then you have a dedicated firepower which supports next generation IPS. And this ASA will be responsible for doing all your standard firewall features, and then your traffic may get redirected to the firepower for firepower services for verification and then send it back. So either you can have two appliances, that is one option. You can have two appliances, that is one of the option. Or you can have just one appliance, like you can have an ASA, and this ASA is added with a firepower module. Now this is a module, not a dedicated device. Now this module can be in the form of a software or hardware, whatever it supports, because different platforms supports different models. I'll talk about that in the models when we get into the firepower product line. And you can get the benefits of both. So this is another second option. So the second option, what we are doing, we are going to add the firepower services, and these firepower services are added on the one physical hardware. So you have a one dedicated ASA, and you're adding on the top of the ASA. The third option, you can just go ahead and just use something called FTD, which is common nowadays. So if you're going to buy a new product, you probably go and buy the FTD device, the firepower threat defense, which has a unified image. So there's one image which supports both. It supports both your ASA features as well as your firepower services. So as you can see, the category, the same what I explained just now. So you can have your NGIPS device. NGIPS device, this is a typically firepower device, a dedicated firepower, or you can say this is running your old source fire image, probably running any firepower version it supports. And in your network, again, you cannot run, basically they don't support the basic firewall features. So you still need an ASA to do this. So either you can add these things, that is one option, or you can add a separately installed module on the ASA device. Like this is the second option I said, the second option, where you can have an ASA firewall added with images. So you can have added the image either in the form of software or the hardware. So the ASA with firepower services. So technically we call this as ASA with firepower services. So whenever you say ASA with firepower services, there will be some models with firepower services, which means you need to understand that the ASA is the physical hardware added with a firepower module in the form of hardware or the software. Or you can go with a dedicated FTD device. FTD, again, this comes in physical or virtual. We'll talk about that. So when you talk about Cisco firepower devices, these are the devices options. Mostly here, we don't use this legacy option because this is actually legacy source file image, which do not support the ASA features. So we either use the ASA with firepower services, or we use a dedicated device called FTD. So the combination, we call it as FTD because there are some few terminologies we'll be using like FTD or FMC. FMC is again the management. FTD is actual device, or if you see firepower, firepower is actually a next generation firewall services. So you can add that on a physical hardware. That's what the FTD provides, or you can add it in the form of a module.